This is Jason from MainstreamGeek.com, and you're listening to the Mainstream Geek Podcast for January 27th, 2016. What's going on, everybody? Again, this is Jason. I'm the guy who runs MainstreamGeek.com, and we're going to go over a few headlines from the day to show you the kind of stuff you'll find on MainstreamGeek.com. We try to keep this under half an hour, so let's jump right in. First up, Netflix teases November release date for Luke Cage on Jessica Jones' Twitter account. It's not really a confirmed thing. What it is on the Twitter account of Jessica Jones for the TV show, or the Netflix show, there's a photo of Jessica Jones' desk, and it has two manila folders on it, like legal folders, and one of the folders says Cage November. So that's leading people to believe that the show for Luke Cage is going to be coming out in November. Look, I think we can all agree that the Netflix shows have been amazing, and I'm happy they exist, especially Daredevil. But is a Luke Cage show really needed? If you think about it, Jessica Jones, the show itself, could have been called Luke Cage and Jessica Jones, or Jessica Jones and Luke Cage, however you want to go about saying it. I'm not sure either of them were interesting enough for their own show. Both are great characters on their own, but we've been introduced to them already. We've already got an idea of who they are. Why are we sticking with expanding on them when we haven't even gotten to the Iron Fist show that we were promised? And we've already got a second season of Daredevil coming up. We haven't even begun to get the first round of shows for all the other shows that they promised us that lead up to the Defenders out. And they've already got second seasons of shows like Daredevil and Jessica Jones coming out. I'm sure there will be a second season of Luke Cage. But why didn't they just make Luke Cage and Jessica Jones their own show, since they're involved together, and then the second season of that show could expand on both of those characters a little bit, instead of just kind of meandering by making a series for Luke Cage himself. So if they're going to release a Luke Cage show in November of 2016, what does that mean for the release schedule of the rest of the characters on the Netflix side of Marvel? I mean, as it stands right now, the schedule is Daredevil on March 18th, which is introducing John Barenthal as the Punisher. John Barenthal played what's the guy's name who fucked Rick's wife on The Walking Dead? Shane. John Barenthal played Shane. He's going to be the Punisher on Daredevil. And they're already saying that he was so good as the Punisher that they're going to spin that off into its own show. And there's also rumors of a Moon Knight show coming. There's all kinds of other new shows coming down the line that we're not even going to talk about here. But that's other things you need to think about when you're thinking about this kind of scenario. You also need to think about, with Daredevil's second season, will it get a third season? Where will that put things in the release schedule? But then, after Daredevil comes out on March 18th, Luke Cage comes out in November. God only knows if it'll get a second season, but everything on Netflix gets a second season. That shitty werewolf show, Hemlock Grove, that has at least 2 seasons that I know of. So that's almost a sure thing that Luke Cage will get a second season. Jessica Jones has already been confirmed for a second season, so we can safely assume that she'll take the spring release in 2017, unless that's Daredevil's, because it seems like he owns that slot since he came out in April 2015 and now March 2016. Again, this is all based on the past where they've released a spring and a fall show, and really you can't even really base it on that because they have only released 2 shows at this point. So I'm not trying to get worked up over nothing. I'm just saying what I'm thinking at this moment. But with all of that, what do we do about Iron Fist, the show? I want to see that. A Danny Rand show would be fucking awesome. Where does that put the Defenders? You can't have the Defenders show until Iron Fist has had a show. They need to have all those characters set up so they can have the Defenders show, just like they did with the original Marvel movies. They had an Iron Man movie, then they had a Hulk movie, then they had a second Iron Man movie, Thor, and then Captain America, which all led into the Avengers, so we knew all of the players in the movie. That way they didn't have to be reintroduced during the film. So let's take a look at a likely timeline of how this will play out on Netflix. Again, we get Daredevil March 2016, Luke Cage November 2016, likely the second season of Jessica Jones or a third season of Daredevil in the spring of 2017. I would imagine that we would finally get Iron Fist, hopefully, in the fall of 2017, unless they give that to Luke Cage or whichever of the previous 2 didn't make the cut for spring of 2017, which I don't think they'll do because they know they have to get this thing moving. Then we could get a new season of Daredevil in the spring of 2018, or the Defenders, finally, unless they decide to up the output. But I don't know that they're going to do that because, according to them, they've said that they're only going to do about 2 shows a year. If they're going to add more shows, they're going to have to up the output if they ever want to get to the Defenders. It's like I pointed out on Monday's episode, this is where Marvel is going all wrong. They're announcing that they're going to be releasing all of these titles for properties before the first one is even released, and knowing that it's going to do well. It's like Spider-Man and Ant-Man. Marvel came out in 2014 and gave a full slate of movies coming out between then and 2020, I think it was. A few months later, they inked a deal with Sony to include Spider-Man in the Marvel Universe movies, and they had to shuffle movies around once. Then Ant-Man came out and did well, so they had to shuffle movies around again to make room for Ant-Man and the Wasp. I guarantee that when Black Panther, Captain Marvel, etc. come out, they're going to have to shuffle dates around again to fit their sequels. When you have a property that's hot that comes out in 2016, you can't wait till 2021 to have the sequel come out. People don't have that attention span anymore. Especially when the property is a C-list character like Ant-Man, Black Panther, or Captain Marvel. They aren't household names before the movies come out like Iron Man, Captain America, or the Hulk. They're doing the same thing with Netflix series. They're announcing that there are all these things coming out before they even find out if there's demand for them. It comes out, and the demand for each individual series is that the public wants more, so you have to accommodate. As much as I love Daredevil, I'd say it's a 9 out of 10. I'd give Jessica Jones a solid 7 out of 10. Why not make the first season of these shows 6 to 8 episodes? Even though Daredevil was great, it definitely could have been tightened up. There were a few episodes that they just kind of wasted time, like the episode where Foggy found out that Matt was Daredevil. I felt like the entire episode was a lot of Foggy sitting around saying, "Why didn't you tell me, Matt?" And then Matt would say, "Well, here's why I didn't tell you." And then Foggy's response would be over and over again, "Well, yeah, but why didn't you tell me?" They just waste a lot of times like that. 13 episodes was great, and I was glad to get them, but if you're trying to launch a Netflix universe of the Marvel universe, why not give all the shows a pilot season over the course of a year? Release Daredevil in March, and then Luke and Jessica in June, and then Iron Fist in November, and then do a 13-episode Defender series and keep going in that direction. Every year, just have a new Defender series come out, or maybe even 2 years. I mean, I know that's 4 series in a year is a lot. Well, maybe even every 2 years, like have a new series come out every 6 months of like 6 to 8 episodes. That'd be a much better way of doing things, because then you don't get in this whole thing where you're caught up in this tight timeline. Also, that way you never leave the fans waiting. There's always something new. Every 6 months or so, there's a new episode, a new series to get caught up on, and they're always engaged. But what do I know? I don't run Netflix. I don't run a TV show. I just know how I think things should go. What else we have in the news? Zack Snyder talks about why he chose Doomsday as the villain for Batman v Superman. He said, "To go up against heroes like Batman and Superman, we wanted to introduce one of the DC Universe's most iconic and powerful villains. He's essentially an unstoppable force. He poses a real threat to the world within the film." I guess. But it's called Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, implying that this is how the Justice League begins. Also implying that the sequel to this movie is going to be Justice League Part 1, right? That's what it leads me to believe, at least. You're introducing roles in this movie. You got Batman and Superman, obviously. Wonder Woman. Then they're introducing the Flash, Aquaman, Cyborg. So there's already 6 heroes in this movie. Is that 6? Yeah, 6. 6 heroes in this movie that we're aware of. It seems like every week they're already talking about somebody new in the movie. Just this week I read that, what's her name? Maggie Grace? No, it's not Maggie Grace. She plays Maggie from The Walking Dead. Is going to be Bruce Wayne's mom. So they're going to rehash the death of his parents, which is really weird because the movie's been done for months. They already presented it to the MPAA, so I don't understand how they're adding characters at this point. But anyway, it's pretty obvious what Doomsday is there for. He's there to have a reason for Batman and Superman to come together and work as a team, and then Wonder Woman obviously falls into the mix. I don't know how Aquaman... By the way, I hate Aquaman as a character. He is so boring to me. A guy that can talk to fish. Granted, I haven't read any comic books of his past, like, I don't know, when I was a kid last time I read an Aquaman comic, but he was always so boring to me. But I don't know how they're going to incorporate Aquaman or the Flash or Cyborg. By the way, what are they... I know they're not mixing the TV and the movie universes for these DC Cinematic Universe. How are they dealing with people not getting confused with who the Flash is and who all the characters that they're crossing over are? Isn't there a Cyborg character in the Green Arrow series? But anyway, so we know why Doomsday is there. We've all known since the second trailer, they made it pretty blaringly obvious why Doomsday was there. He was there to be the goal for the common good, to bring them together. My main question is, why not make Batman v Superman be about Batman fighting Superman? Make that the whole movie. Leave the threat that brings them together as the cliffhanger for the Justice League Part 1. Not only is this a wasted buildup, but it's a wasted villain with the use of Doomsday. It's a wasted buildup because since we know there's going to be a follow-up movie, why not leave us with a cliffhanger instead of breaking up the flow of what we all came to see? It's a wasted villain because we all know that Doomsday is just Zod that has been messed with by Lex Luthor. So why not just call him Zod still? Why tarnish the future use of Doomsday? Not to mention Doomsday's awesome backstory by trying to cram yet another character into this clusterfuck. We all saw this week that the dream sequence in the movie is hinting that the villain in the Justice League is going to be Darkseid. Why waste that build-up? None of this adds up. As always, this is just my opinion and just what I would like to see. And I'm sure I'll like the movie just fine. I'm going to be there opening day. I'm not saying it's going to be bad. I'm just saying, like, by sitting around thinking about it, this is what I would like to see as opposed to what's being presented to me by the trailers, by the marketing, by everything else I'm getting. So take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. I'm not saying it's going to ruin the movie for me if it doesn't go this way. I'm just saying this is what I would like to see instead of what they're presenting to me. Let's do, we're way ahead of time, but let's just do one more and then we'll call it an episode. Looks like we know how Hulk's going to appear in Thor Ragnarok. Turns out that Thor will basically be playing the character of Beta Ray Bill in the movie. If you don't know who Beta Ray Bill is, he's a horse face version of Thor that appeared back in Thor comics, I think, back in the 80s. Don't quote me on the 80s thing. I'm just basing that on the way I'm picturing him being drawn back in the old days. So I'm guessing it was the 80s just because of the style of it all. Most notably, he's in the Planet Hulk series where Hulk is sent away because the Illuminati view him as too dangerous to be on Earth. So they put him in a ship, send him off into space. He crash lands on a planet that has gladiator-style rules, and he becomes this champion gladiator. So turns out that the plot behind Thor Ragnarok is going to be that Thor is banished from Asgard, and he ends up on this planet, and he becomes the top gladiator that ends up having to fight Hulk, and they become buddies since they know each other, and they free themselves from the being enslaved as gladiators. So they're kind of changing up the story to Planet Hulk there. I'm not sure why they're calling this Thor Ragnarok, because Thor Ragnarok is its own story about the end of times, a couple of its own storylines about the end of times for the Thor storyline. So that's a weird title that they picked. I would have picked Planet Hulk and just had it be a Hulk movie that happened to co-star Thor at this point, right? I mean, that makes more sense because it seems like it's way more based around the Planet Hulk series than it is Ragnarok, and then maybe save Ragnarok for its own closeout of the Thor series. Hulk only has one movie that fits into the canon of the Marvel movies, so why not give him a second movie and then use the closing of the Thor trilogy by using Ragnarok? That seems like it makes more sense to me. I don't want to say this sounds bad, but it definitely doesn't sound good to me. I've never been a big Thor movie fan. I mean, they're fine. I've never been a big fan of the Thor movies to begin with, but this sounds kind of weak to me. I would much rather that they give Hulk his own Planet Hulk storyline. But this could be awesome. I mean, I could be very wrong. Just like everything else I've talked about on this show, I haven't seen any of the movies I've spoken about in this episode. And no one else has either, except for the people making them, of course. So I could definitely be wrong. I'm just speculating like any other asshole with a microphone can do. But I'm going to end the show there. Do you guys agree or disagree with anything I've said in the show? I want to hear from you. You can reach out to me at jason@mainstreamgeek.com, on Twitter @mainstreamgeek. Search for Mainstream Geek on Facebook. Make sure you're subscribed on iTunes, Stitcher, or whatever way you choose to listen. If you do listen through iTunes, do me a favor and leave a rating and review. That's what helps me get in the rankings. That's what helps me get found so I can spew my opinions at everyone. Visit mainstreamgeek.com to see more news. And if you're interested in hearing my other podcasts, please visit completelystraight.com to check it out. That's all I've got for you today. I'll see you on Friday. Keep it geeky.